Hey, my name, as you can see up there and have heard, is Andy Larson, and I am here to inspire you, motivate you, applaud you, and most of all, have fun. Is this too loud?
It stays up there.
Because I don't know if the rain will bother you, but it bothers me. I wanted to, the fun part is pretty important, and what I just cleaned up are transmitters that are used with a device that I built for the net called Cranium CoRE. And today, for the first time ever, I'm going to try something different, and it's the fun part a little bit. You're all familiar with the Common Core? That's what I thought. And part of the Common Core's main ideas, there are many. Collaboration. Yes, sir. Collaboration. Yes, sir. So we're going to do some collaborative efforts here. But before I actually get into that, what I want to invite any of you who have a device that's connected to the internet to do, especially if it's an iOS device, go to the Apple Store and download Cranium CoRE Remote. It's a free app. That will come into play here in a few minutes. I'm not going to tell you any more than that. And it might be distracting. You're not going to miss a whole lot. What I say is not that critical. Your gaming is, though. And I'm also going to tell you that this presentation is a little bit about you getting to know me. Unfortunately, when you do a presentation like this, although how many of you were at Interactive? A fair amount. My presentations for 4 decades has really not changed as a major theme. The major theme is reading. I think reading is the most important thing, period, educationally. You know, people have different views, but that's my view. And because it's my presentation, I can do what I want. So it's going to be about reading. And although my presentations change a little bit here and there, I don't want the people who were at Interactive to feel like it's the same presentation, because it is a little bit different. But it is mostly the same, but for 4 decades, like I said, it's been mostly the same. Because what I find in education and in life, the major things in between the swings of the pendulum of what are we doing this year? What's that about? They change, but in between those pendulum swings, the major things don't change. And to me, you're going to see some of that thematically throughout my presentation and everywhere I go. With that in mind, I'll start my presentation then. This was one of the slides that you saw up there before when you were walking in. I just like to take inspirational things and put them out there because I like that kind of thing. This one's important in tying to reading especially. Employ your time in improving yourself by other men's writing so that you shall gain easily what others have labored hard for. Part of the reading thing for me is the learning and walking in someone else's shoes. It's hard to do that, but writing makes it really pretty easy to do. So someone from eons ago, like Socrates, can write something that we still benefit from. That applies today. Our kids are moving further and further, in my mind, away from the ability to write, read, speak, and listen very well. And the technology that we're being exposed to, even as adults, is detrimental, I think, to all those things. So one of the challenges that all of us have, because your lives aren't easy, and teaching is a really, really important thing to do. One of our challenges is how to take technology and tip it on its head and use it to pull kids into those skills. And again, that's not easy. That's what the Common Core is asking us to do. It's what we're expected to do. These are just some quotes. There shouldn't be a GD computer in any classroom if the kids can't read. There's no use going to school unless your final destination is the library. These are both from a guy named Ray Bradbury, who died early June, late May 2012. The first one is really important to me because, again, I'll say it, and I say this every time I go anywhere, even in a technology conference. I don't care what kind of technology you have. If kids can't read, it doesn't matter. In fact, it increases the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Because we're being inundated with information at an increasingly alarming pace. And if you can't read, the technology brings it to us that much faster and it increases the gap. Do all of you see that? Even in our own lives. Today, even a specialist in medicine has a hard time keeping up with their degree of specialty because of that information flow. So what this means basically is it's more critical than ever to be able to read well and to think well and find things and ask questions. And I don't care whether you call it Common Core or whatever you call it. That's the important point for me. And in my life, as I'm going to share with you, you're going to see how it played itself out and how I got to this point. This is a long one, again from Ray Bradbury, but it's worth repeating, because this is, again, inspirational. If we listen to our intellect, we'd never have a love affair. We'd never have a friendship. We'd never go in business because we'd be cynical. It's going to go wrong, or she's going to hurt me, or I had a couple of bad love affairs, so therefore, well, that's nonsense. You're going to miss life. You've got to jump off the cliff all the time and build your wings on the way down. You've got to take chances. You can't walk in line like everybody else. And that's what we do in government, in education, and so often in life. So if nothing else today, if I can blast you out of that walking in line, mission accomplished. But do it in a fun way, because that's how it works best. And again, these are just my go back. It should be the focus of all we do. It won't matter how much technology you offer students if they can't read well and comprehend. And again, this is a reinforcement. Let's use our creative natures to challenge our students while we show how to make learning almost as enjoyable as anything we do. Almost. Because I'm not so unrealistic to say it's going to be as enjoyable as everything we do, but for me, we can get it real close, and that's important. How many of your kids today that you teach would say reading is the most fun thing they do? Hardly any, I'm guessing. If I could see the bubbles over your head saying none, very little. A few though. That's a shame. Now, gameplay. Here's what we're going to do next. And this is the challenging technical part. I'm going to take you to the website Cranium CoRE. Now, it's important for you to know that this is not a demonstration of Cranium CoRE so much as I want you to understand what I'm about and how I actually successfully, I believe, for 17 years now, have taken technology and turned kids on to reading. Some of you have seen me in a classroom already. I would venture to say that in the 17 years I've done this, every teacher who I've ever done this with will walk away and say, you know what? He creates a palpable energy for reading that is not normal in classrooms. And that's what I want you to be able to do. You don't have to do it with what I have. There's lots of ways to do it. And I'm going to share that with you. I'm going to try to get to my website. Those of you who have, show of hands, how many have downloaded the app? Cool, cool. Now it's going to get tricky though, because I'm going to log in and I'm going to walk you through the process of the classroom environment. Now, your classrooms aren't as big as I have a classroom right now. That's going to be a challenge all by itself. So I wouldn't recommend you do this in your classroom, what I'm about to do. Because I'm going to take a chance here. For the first time ever, instead of using these transmitters, I'm going to let the first 10 people who sign in to my game play the game. And whoever signs in first, you can follow the process here relatively quickly. I'm going to then allow you to be the captain of your teams, and when the questions come up on the screen, there are only going to be 2. You can then take the feedback and collaborate with your teammates around you. And here's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you. You see up there, Chapter 1, Tamika, an intro, the orange houses. These are the first 2 pages. You all have this? What I'm going to do is what I do in a classroom, although it's going to be in abbreviated form. I'm going to read aloud to you. Not that I don't think you can read, and I'll explain how it came to this a lot later. But I'm going to read aloud to you because it's my way of leveling. See, I don't necessarily follow the Lexile rules and all the other stuff that says oh my gosh, they don't have that lexile, they better not try that book. I try something different that I was taught from my dad, actually. I read aloud to people after I find out what they're interested in. So I'm going to read the poem first, and then the second page. And then we're going to play a game based on what I read to you. You're my angel, bomb blast bright. No slight heaven, no minor light. You are the way, the truth, the light. How you love me, girl, the world a swirl. No way, no truth, no light. Will you still love me when you find out I true be outside humanity? Lost with a fire's need. A man from sands, forsaken plans, no bonds or bands. The devil's hands? Only you, child, can save me. Jimmy Sixes. Next page. Jimmy Sempervivo changed his name to Jimmy Sixes when he came back from the desert, but most folks call him Crazy Jimmy. His military service ended with a mandatory discharge, honorable, after Army psychiatrists determined he was incapable of carrying out his duties. He enlisted at 17, shipped out his 18th birthday, and was sent home 6 months later. What follows here happened a few months after Jimmy came home, shortly before he was supposed to turn 19. He sketched this rhyme into a newspaper margin. Then he whispered it to the rats that shared his cave so as not to wake his friend, 15-year-old Tamika Sykes, sleeping restlessly in the stove light, but not bleeding anymore. She'd been cut bad. Jimmy's other friend, Fatima Espere, was above ground, but in no less danger. An hour after Jimmy wrote the poem, the vigilantes hung him. Now, before we play the game, I was going to ask you a question. If you read that to a group of middle schoolers, do you think that you'd have their attention? What do you think? Yeah? Absolutely. When I read that, I couldn't wait to start that book and find out what was going on. So, we're going to play this game, and only the first 2 questions of this game deal with what I just read, just to give you a feel for what I'm talking about how to use technology. Now, up here on the screen, you'll see it'll say, using mobile devices as team remote controllers, I'll say yes. The first 10 of you that enter on the code, when you enter that application, the code IEYSJ, and then your team name, your name, is what I'd recommend, and then hit connect, will come up on the screen. After that, from 11 on, you won't get in the game. So, now, you see your names up there. I don't know if you know who you are, because maybe the last name would have helped, but we'll see. You'll see on your transmitter, it'll change because it'll make it into the game mode. So we're going to play this game.
Ready, set, go.
And here's how this works. I'm going to pause the game. Upper right-hand corner, 36 seconds. I read the question, and then you see the answers. You'll see your team names along the sides. Right now, those of you who are actually playing, it should say the game is paused. How many see that? Okay. You're the team captains. I expect you to ask your teammates around you what the answers are to these questions. I read the question, all the answers, I unpause it, then you can answer. Jimmy Sixes, based on this poem, sounds mostly blank. Guilt-ridden, tormented, insane, suicidal. You just have to hit 1, 2, 3, or 4. If it says try again, try again. If it says one last try, one last try. Come on, Jenny. Come on, Jenny, you can do it. Oh, no. Where is Team Jenny? All right. No sense in embarrassing anybody. That's already done it. So, now, what you just experienced is a higher level thinking question. This exists because AR and reading counts, what used to be called electronic bookshelf, drove me nuts in the 80s because they were literal questions that were skimming the surface and didn't allow anybody to dive in, on top of which they started labeling books, and kids look for books at their level only for points. And they started chasing points. And to me that was nuts. And it created a ceiling. Now, I'm not against AR. I'm not against reading counts. Whatever it takes. What I'm for, though, is diving the kids into the book so they really understand what they're reading. That, to me, makes more sense. That's why this exists. Here's where this comes in to play. At this point, and those of you who have seen me do this in a class know this is what I do. I stop at this point and ask the class, based on the text, why was the answer tormented versus guilt-ridden, insane, and suicidal? We don't have the luxury of time or even a vehicle to answer the question, but that's the purpose. Dive in, defend your answer. That's the metacognitive part of this. There's a cognitive part, there's a metacognitive part. The why was that the right answer, is the metacognitive part. You can do this with anything. I'm going to try it with one more question so we can embarrass at least one more group. And the bar chart actually is the favorite part of the game for most kids because they like to see who's ahead. What, according to our text, was the author's main purpose for writing an hour after Jimmy wrote the poem, The Vigilantes Hung Him? 1, to show how unfair life is. 2, to tie the poem to the reason Jimmy died. 3, to get the reader's attention. 4, to indicate just how crazy Jimmy was. Okay, one more, 2 more. Angie! Come on, Angie. Good job. So, class, we're doing much better. And again, to get the reader's attention, this is an inferential question. I could go on with this. This book, this issue, is going to come up a couple other times with videos that I'm going to show you of other people in the United States who, with this same book, same process, tangentially touched Cranium CoRE but did other things as well. Because what I'll always say to people is, this isn't about Cranium CoRE. This is about thinking. This is about technology getting kids into thinking. And again, whether you call it Common Core or best practices or whatever you call it, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't care. I just want the kids to love to read. That's my passion. That's what I want. Because I'll tell you what, and I think you'll probably agree with this, if kids love to read, you'd be 90% of the way home with a lot of the battles you face in any curriculum you teach. And it doesn't matter whether it's literature, fictional, or non-fiction, informational. It doesn't really matter. And I'll prove that in my life, how you can transfer the skill from one thing to another for reasons to read, and why it just works. I just have a... No, I'll save that for later. I have a crazy thought. So I'm going to get out of this. And end up back here, I think. There's a couple keystrokes I should have hit. Now this book, I talk about often. One of the things that does change over time is I read different things. I read a lot of books. In fact, what I do, I don't have a life. I read books and I write questions for Cranium CoRE. And I teach teachers to teach kids how to write questions. And I try to run this business from the internet, with just me being the person who markets it. Although my partner who does the technology is awesome. Some of you have met him, RJ. This book, in particular, struck me a while back when I read it, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. And I could tell you this, I think you know this anyway. I mean, a day doesn't go by that I don't read or hear something about how this is affecting, this being our tie to the social network world, whether it's tweeting, Facebook, again, it goes on and on. Emailing before that. All these things are adversely affecting and overloading our short-term memories. In fact, there are 12-step programs because this is an addiction just like anything else is. Just like any chemical addiction. And people already suffer from this. And I'm not just talking driving down the road and getting in an accident. I'm talking about teenagers who sleep with their phones and don't sleep all night because they're answering their texts. That's crazy. But that's the real world. And here's the other hot tip. Whether Mark Zuckerberg is willing to admit it or not, it's not a social community. It turns us into an antisocial group of people because we're doing texting. We're not looking at each other in the face and talking. And again, I think that's crazy. But that's what's going on. And that's what this book is about. And it's a terribly horrible read. But it's 100 pages of really solid research. That's good to read, even if you can get through it. Because here's what it comes down to. Our brains are being rewired. And our short-term memory is being overloaded. And what happens with your brain as it rewires itself, it's got to go someplace and get something else, somewhere else, to make up for it. And we're losing our neurons going to long-term memory in our area where we contemplate. So when we send kids off to universities, and the universities say, well, they can read, but they can't problem solve. They can't think well. That's why this is happening. And it's not just happening to our kids, it's happening to us as adults too. I mean, again, I don't know if you see it within yourselves or with the people that you work with, but it's a real problem. So, what do? So as educators, we've got to find a way to balance this conflict between the social need, got to be in touch with whoever I can be in touch with, and our contemplative nature, because we like to think, we like to solve problems, we like to problem solve and do things that are really helpful. But they're like this now, because of this technology. Hopefully using technology, we're not going to shy away from how to grab those two together. I can tell you, just from my personal standpoint, 17 years ago when I came up with this gaming idea, I did not know this was going to happen. I did not know that what I was going to do was going to use technology to actually use contemplation and social together rather than apart and bump into each other. Because what Cranium CoRE is a social network. You'll see that in a minute. It doesn't have walls. And you can actually see people and talk to them. That's the kind of thing. You can do it with other things too, though, and I've seen it tangentially with other things that touch what I do. The beauty of what I do, when I go out to schools and work with classes, it's the favorite thing I do because I see the eyes light up with the kids. A lot of times the kids who are pushed aside don't have a chance. Biggest challenge. See if Andy can get these kids excited. And it always works. And I see their eyes light up. I see the shining eyes. And again, I didn't know that what I was going to do was going to counter this. And it's a critical thing to do. Now, 1, 2, 3. This is kind of like my iPod. I can do what I want. You're like my dad. I pick my music. 1961. Father knows best. I'll stop there. My dad taught me the most important thing educationally in my life. Here's a picture of my dad. He was in the roller derby in the late 1930s and 40s. He's in the roller derby encyclopedia 3 times. At one point, he was the fastest man on roller skates. And, you know, this picture is a great picture. He kind of reminds me of like a Jimmy Stewart. It's like that Jimmy Stewart look, right? Here's what happened to my dad, though. He went into World War II, and he lost his leg from the knee down, above the knee down. And he was a really good athlete, and he made his money that way. So he lost the love of his life, he lost his money-making ability, and he had to somehow bounce back. By the time I was born, 5 years after he lost his leg, he was always just my dad with one leg. I didn't know anything about his roller derby experience, none at all. So I'm 12 years old, 1961. He had brought me books from the public library every other Friday since I was about 6 years old, because he knew I liked baseball. And to my dad, it was really just intuitive. He likes baseball. I'll get him baseball biography books. So I read every baseball biography book you could possibly imagine of all the Hall of Famers to start with. A lot of the New York Yankees, because I liked Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle at the time. They were going through that home run thing. But I read, because my dad brought me books. Now, my dad was not a touchy, huggy, feely guy. He never said, you know, this is what you got to do. He just intuitively brought me the books. And one day, he brought me a book called Sal Magley, the Barber. And as I tell people, and I'll never forget this day, because it was the first time he said to me anything about what he was doing and why he was doing it. I shoved the book away because Sal Magley had a really rough look on his face. He didn't shave a couple days before he pitched, and he was a mean guy. And they called him the Barber because he threw at people, shaved them away from the plate. Hence the name. So I shoved the books away. I go, and my dad says, "No, Andy, I think you really like that book. He's an interesting guy." And I said, "What do you do this for anyway?" In my 11-year-old understanding way, or 12 at the time. And my dad walked on crutches a lot, and he had really strong arms, and he could have just picked me up and slammed me up against the wall. But he just said, "Well, let me tell you something. If you can read well, you'll probably be able to write okay. And if you can read and write okay, you'll probably be able to speak okay. And if you can read and write and speak okay, you'll probably get to tell this to the Burlington School District in 2013. And again, he was intuitive, but not that intuitive. But what he really did say at the end was, "You'll probably never starve." Because to my dad, it was this simple. If you can read, write, and speak, and I added listen to my gaming, because I think men don't listen well enough anyway. I think people don't listen well enough. But if you can do those 4 things well, that's like a case, a toolbox mentally that you can take anywhere, to any job, to any curriculum, and not only succeed, you'll thrive. And that's what I know personally. That's what I've seen vicariously as well as directly. Although I don't have the luxury like all you teachers do, although I'm an educator, because of what I do now, especially, I fly in like the fairy godfather, and I have some fun, I play the games, and then I'm gone. And I have fun, and I show people how to do it. And I leave, and the teachers still have the kids. Now, when I've got them, I'm no threat, and I'm playing a game. But I'm also doing something that's pretty hard for these kids, even if they're AP kids, because my questions are challenging, and it's all open book. And then they have to defend their answer. And guess what? I don't care where they are in the United States, they are not good at it to start with. But here's the other thing. Even the reluctant readers get very good very quickly if they just practice. Now, here's a picture of my dad. This was the last picture that I took of him. This is the picture, these 2 pictures, for those who went to your interactive conference, you saw my dad with his Read to Me shirt on. The day I did the interactive conference was his 97th birthday, June 13th, 2012. He died 2 months later. Now, I didn't know at the time he was going to die. I spent, from that point on at that interactive conference, I spent the last 2 months with my dad, save the last 2 weeks, because I had to leave for 2 weeks, and I didn't get back. I missed him dying by 1 day, which was maybe not an important thing to hear, but I wanted to be there. That's not important, though. The important thing is, this guy, to the end, was a reader. He wanted people to read to him if they could, because he could still hear okay. And he listened to books, and he followed with big print books. That particular book he's holding is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was the book he was reading. Huge print. But in any case, that's the epitome. To the end, my dad was a reader. And now I'm living in Florida because my sisters and I decided that we didn't want my mom to be in a home. So because I do an internet business, I'm living with her in Florida. And that's my mom, next door. Outliers. This comes to the practice issue. And again, this book, Practice, Practice, Practice. Have any of you read this book, any of you? Now, the major theme is when you're born and who you practice with when you're born, depending on where you are and hockey, it happens with a lot of sports. Depending on where you're born, you might be stretched or behind, depending on where you are in the birth setting, right? But the other thing that is a major theme is that no matter who you are, no matter what you do in life, the best people at what they do are the people who practice the best and the most. Reading, writing, speaking, listening, they're all about practice. What happens in education, unfortunately, is we don't spend enough time practicing, but we spend a whole lot of time testing. Way, 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 way more testing than we need to. And there's more testing coming, which is even crazier. Because it's like being a farmer and having a calf and weighing it every day but not feeding it and saying, I can't understand it. I weigh it every day. Why isn't it gaining weight? And again, and honestly, someday, let's just say, I'm successful with teachers and Cranium CoRE, changing the world, turning it on its head, getting kids to really love to read. You know what? I think that would be a good platform to run for President of the United States. And again, you may think I'm crazy, but I'm not. Because I really believe that if we did the right job and got kids to love to read, it would work. And I know it because I've done it again and again and again. It doesn't have to be Cranium CoRE. I'll keep saying that until I drop dead. This is not about Cranium CoRE. I'm going to tell you a story now. I talk about transference of skills. I built a house by myself. Well, my dad helped me. In 1977, I went to a class on how to build an energy efficient house. It was a 2-week compressed class. They didn't tell me I had to be a carpenter. Well, maybe they did and I didn't hear it. But I went to the class, paid a lot of money. Shelter Institute in Bath, Maine. And I'm sitting in the class and the teacher's writing on the board. And I'm asking, what's a plumb bob? What's a T-square? What's a this, what's a, and he'd go, after a while, he had black hair, Pat Hannon. He would erase with the back of his hand, he'd put his left hand, and he'd put his hand through his hair, and to take a deep breath, says, let me guess, you're not a carpenter. No, why? Did they tell you to be a carpenter to take the class? No. Okay, it's a 2-week class, not a 2-year class. So what I want you to do is write your questions down. I'll eat lunch with you every day at dinner. Deal? Deal. So I came back. Now I can tell you, there is no possible way a non-carpenter can take a 2-week class on how to build an energy-efficient house and then build an energy-efficient house. But I did. Because there were 2 books were given me with the class. Your Engineered House and From the Ground Up. And I came back and I read those books. And let me just tell you also, in school, I was a really good reader. It carried me. I was not a good student though. And this is my cross-curricular approach to my presentation for science. I'm going to bring science into this. I goofed off a lot. And here's a joke. Why was the mushroom, science, why was the mushroom invited to all the parties? Because he was a fun guy. And that's what I was. I was a fun guy. But when it got really important, college, not a problem. I did okay. But I didn't learn how to build a house. So I read those 2 books. And people were saying to me, you're crazy, you can't build a house. There's no way you can build a house. Well, I thought, okay, and my wife even said, you can't do this. Well, I said, if I can draw the blueprints, I can build a house. So I drew the blueprints. It was a post and beam house. I had to do stress load calculations. And because I read baseball biography books and I was great with batting averages and slugging percentages and ERAs, I could actually read how to do calculus, which I never took. I barely took algebra. But I could do the calculations. And the house actually still, to this day, stands. And I went to banks to get loans. And they said, did you ever build anything before? A doghouse. But my dog never went in it. Sorry. So three banks, 3 no's, but they did say, I'll tell you what though, if you build the frame, come back, we'll have some collateral, and then we might give you a loan. Well, it took me 3 years to build it, 3 summers, because I was selling books for Follett at the time. And some people traveled, some people took vacations, I built a house. And it took me 3 summers because I was slow. But also because I needed the money, and I didn't want to go to the bank. Because finally, when it came down to it and I saw I could build it, I just said, heck with you guys, I don't need you. I'll build it with cash. So I built the house with cash over 3 years. And that's what it looks like. And if you saw the inside, it's even more spectacular, because my wife had a lot of class. But I did that because I read baseball biography books that my dad got me when I was a kid. And people go, no way. No, I'm telling you, way. And every person out there has the ability to do anything they want to do if you can finally unleash in them the idea that if they read, they can do anything. Because it's out there for you to grab if you can read it. So, next, another impossible idea. A company is born. This is again crazy, but I'm going to do it real fast. I started a company called Follett Software. It was an idea that I got. I got a lot of ideas. My right brain is really active, my left brain is very inactive. I'm not organized, but I have a lot of ideas. I started a company called Follett Software because I got the idea that libraries were really important, and librarians are really important, and if I could free up their time to spend more time with the kids, like my dad would find out I was interested in baseball, the librarians could find out the interest of all the kids. So I got this idea to automate libraries that I handed to Chuck Follett, who was working for his dad at the time for Follett Library Book Company. And he said, okay, you start it. Because I had some technology background, because I worked for Wang Labs for a few years. So I started that company. And today it's the largest company in the world for automating school libraries. And in 1982, when I went out to Apple to talk to Monica Ertel, the librarian for Apple computers, who had one space between her and Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs, interestingly, thought that having a library for his employees would be a smart move. And he didn't have a big organizational chart with her way down here. She was one step below him, and she talked to him a lot. It was an eye-opener for me. I could spend a lot of time about the technology that we started with then and what it has become, but you've seen it, you've lived it, you know it. So that's another unusual thing, because again, here's one of those things. I got this idea, Chuck Follett says do it, I do it, and it becomes a huge success because I could read. I didn't know how to start a company, I just had an idea. And again, I'm just an average guy except for the knucklehead thought that I have that I can do anything. That's what makes me different. If anything makes me different. Now I'm going to jump ahead. And this is going to start to make a little bit of sense to you about how to take technology like I have and wind it in to what you do for the Common Core. That's a Fact Jack was the first iteration of the Cranium CoRE game. Meets Jim Trelease, who wrote the book, the Read Aloud Handbook. When we played just a minute ago, I read aloud to you. When I first came up with this idea, I didn't have reading aloud anywhere on the radar screen at all. I thought, okay, like AR, reading counts, at the time electronic bookshelf, we'll let them read the book, but then I'll write questions for the whole book based on what they read. So I go see this guy named Jim Trelease, and I went to see him because people, when I went out and talked, said, you sound a lot like Jim Trelease. Who's this Jim Trelease guy? Well, I got his book and I read it. And at the time, my wife was pregnant. And I read aloud to Drew when he was in the womb. And he knew my voice when he was still in the womb. And I only knew that because my wife would tell me when she would go to hear me speak and she was pregnant, when he heard my voice, he moved because I read to him. Now, I went to see Jim Trelease, sat in his living room for 4 hours, showed him the prototype, and he said, Andy, this is a great idea. I love it. Higher level thinking questions, really good idea. But I do a couple things different. What? What are you talking about, Jim? He says, who's your main target? Reluctant, struggling readers. Do you really think they're going to read a book to play your game? Well, some do. And some even have people read to them just to play the game, to be a part of it. He says, yeah, but that's the exception, isn't it? Yeah. So where are you going with this, Jim? He says, I'd chunk it. Chunk it, what do you mean? He says, I'd make it a come-as-you-are party. Don't make them read anything. Give them the book, read aloud to them, and write questions chapter by chapter. And then I said, and then discuss the answers. He says, right on. Make them prove their answer. And I'm quoting now. Your questions are so flippin' hard that they got to have the book open anyway to really answer the questions. And then, using the author's words, I follow, let them prove the answer. Now, that was 1996. That was 17 years ago. That was way before the Common Core. And now the Common Core is kind of caught up with what I did then. And again, to me it's all about discussion. It's all about come as you are. It's all about having fun and making it rigorous. And 4 years ago, our gaming went social. And again, it's about fun. And I'm going to show you some things today, here, as well as in the sessions, about what I mean. Because it's got to be fun. It's got to be engaging. What's with gaming anyway? What's the draw? Let's quote Ovid, millenniums ago. A horse never runs so fast as when he has other horses to catch up and outpace. I'm all about competition. I'm not about an award for everybody for everything. Make them earn it. Make them feel good about it. Make them work. Hold the bar up. I do it every time I'm in a class. And you know what? It works. I challenge anybody. I walk on the high wire without the net every time I go into a classroom, and I don't care. Because I know it works. Some of you have seen me already. Others of you may want me to come back in the cold north, be away from my mom, and work. But if you do, I'll do it. Because I'm all about helping people and modeling this. Here's our collective challenge then. How can we use technology to build a bridge from the old to the new in a way that is creative, rigorous, collaborative, and relevant? How can we do that? Plenty of ways. First, it's not about literacy to me, it's about fluency. Fluency is different than literacy. Second, focus on the 21st century skills which we hear so much about. Third, scaffold to the Common Core, which we've heard enough about to puke. Fourth, be disruptively innovative. Fifth, be cross-curricular, interdisciplinary. And sixth, much, much more importantly, I should capitalize the F-U-N, have fun. 21st century fluencies. Solution, information, creativity, collaboration. These are all fluencies. Problem-solving fluencies. Information fluencies, how to grab it, understand it, analyze it. Creativeness. Everybody, all of us as humans, have a desire and a will to create things. Whether you admit it or not. Whether it's a piece of food, a picture, a song, whatever. We have that ability and we have that desire. Collaboration. Again, this is all about working together, and this is the real world. We don't work in an isolated place, typically. Media. Pick the right media to send your message out there. Which is what one of the presidential candidates last time around could have learned a little bit about, I think. When I went to school, Bloom's taxonomy used the left-hand pyramid. In 1999, it changed. Creating went to the top. Now, maybe it's because I'm biased, because I'm so right-brain oriented, but there's a lot of kids out there who are also very creative. And there's a lot of teachers who are very creative. But they're marching in line, and they don't have time to be creative. And it sucks. And you know what? The Common Core is nothing new really, except one thing that I see. It gives you the end result, but gives you some freedom to how to get there. So now, unless we completely screw it up, we'll give the teachers the freedom and flexibility to work with the kids in a self-directed way to be creative. The tangential, this is an example of tangential things that happened to me. In one of the districts down in Florida, they came up with this reading cycle model. Build foundation, build skills, build comprehension, build application. Cranium CoRE fits into 3 of these already. And Cranium CoRE is kind of the heart of what they're doing because they see the kids really getting engaged and working across schools. So, again, I can give anybody these slides if they want them. Because I could spend a whole hour on this alone. Here's the evidence of what they're doing on the creative side. After they played the same games that you saw with orange houses. So this is a trailer for a movie that was going to be made about the orange houses. There's not going to be a movie made for the orange houses, but with the kids who played Cranium CoRE for the chapters of the book and who really now understood what was going on chapter to chapter, they made this trailer. They were one of several. They broke up into teams because everything that I do with kids is team-oriented, so they kept the same teams and they each made their trailer. That's an example of some of those fluencies on display using media. That's really creative. And it could get much better than that too. But it comes to that because the kids dive in. That didn't come from an AR game. That didn't come from read for points. It's you understand what's going on. Even that little piece in there where the thing blew up, Jimmy Sempervivo in the book held a child who was blown up because she was I can't remember in the movie, in the book, she was like 9 years old. But she got blown up from a bomb in Baghdad. And basically, it destroyed him. The kids, before they read this and when they read the book, and as they started discussing it, we found out that they had no idea what it was like to be at war in Afghanistan or Baghdad or any of those other places, right? So they had to talk about it and find out what was going on. That's foundational stuff. But it comes to that because you discuss it, not because you read it and blow by it and kids, yeah, you know, what's that all about? They wouldn't have made that part if they didn't know. And the other thing I'll tell you is when other kids who didn't read the book yet, or read the book, but didn't have the discussion, saw that part, they laughed. They laughed at that part. Which is a totally different reason why they made that part. And again, I'm just telling you, you can read or you can read. Different ways of doing it. 21st century skills, process information, global communication, problem solving, and self-direction. Again, I could spend hours on any of these 3, but all of these 3 are things that you've got to hone in on and give these kids the ability to do. Now, no boundaries. Hannah Beardsley Middle School in Crystal Lake, Illinois played Evergreen Academy via Skype in early December based on Hunger Games. Hannah Beardsley Middle School is they're 90% white. Evergreen Academy is 98% Backgrounds in their homes abound, but they played each other. Crystal Lake won, and they said, let's do this again. So we played again on the 16th of January based on this book, The Orange Houses. And what I'm about to show you are two quick clips. I don't know if the sound's going to be good, but the sound's not really important. You're going to see two schools, a screen with Skype, a screen with the game, and they're using the transmitters just like you did. Devices to knock the walls down and play each other and talk to each other. It's only a few seconds. So that's one quick scene. What you're seeing is a classroom in Crystal Lake. You're not seeing the other screen, which has the other classroom in Evergreen, playing this game for these same questions that you just had. That's what that clip was about. The next one is about the defense. And here's what that looks like.
Okay. Well, he says, will you still love me when you find out I'm true B? Which is more saying, will you still love me when you find out how I really am and beating yourself up over this? He says, how you love me, girl, the world is world, there's no way, there's no truth, is there any light? So he doesn't understand why, he can't understand why she loves him. He doesn't know if there's a way at the end of the tunnel or if there's no reason for it.
She was explaining why he was tormented and why that was the answer. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. This is the way education should be. There should be no walls, there should be no boundaries, there should be communication back and forth with any other school anywhere in the world that you want to play or you want to do something with. In this case, play, because it's surrounding Cranium CoRE. That middle school in Crystal Lake now wants to play schools in Florida. Evergreen wants to play schools elsewhere because now they've got a taste of it and they realize what the technology will allow them to do. And they can write their own questions and create and get feedback. And as far as motivation goes, this is a book I highly recommend, Drive by Daniel Pink. He calls it Motivation 3.0. No carrot and stick. Give them autonomy. Give them the ability to master, which is nothing more than getting better at something that's important to you. And the purpose, it's the why. Whether it's writing questions or creating a film clip or whatever it is, these are the three things that drive people, whether they're working in a business or working in a classroom. Highly recommended book. Common Core Standards. The best thing about the Common Core is the freedom it allows for reaching the end result. I've talked a little bit about that. Creativity should reign, both with content and technology. Now more than ever, teachers are, I think, reading teachers. All of them, all of you. Both fiction as well as nonfiction is the goal to drive the students into the text for deeper meaning. I'm proof. I read baseball biography books, but I could transfer that skill to anything I wanted to. Whether it was building a house or starting a business, you can transfer the skills. You just have to practice. Discussion is the key. My dad taught me this. I know this. You've got to discuss it. Be disruptively innovative. And what does that look like? Some examples. Allowing teachers to make their own reading list to support the curriculum versus required reading list from the district. This is a touchy one too for me because they now have exemplar text lists out there for the Common Core, which are just examples, but administrators are turning them into the list, which is nuts. Because I think if you want to touch somebody today and meet these digital natives where they live, read them The Orange Houses. Don't necessarily worry about Hamlet. Hamlet's not going to save their life. Something in Orange Houses might, though. Allowing the students to bring their own mobile devices for school use, just like I did here with you. Use them. Let them bring them. They think it's pretty cool, and they like it. I don't know what your policies are here for that, but thumbs up, good. Allowing students and teachers to use Skype, iChat to communicate with schools outside their district for a purpose. Not just to do it, for a purpose. Stop eliminating the library media positions and support more library involvement in the entire curriculum. The superintendent isn't here. If I was standing with him, I would say this to his face as well. Here's what I know over 40 years of research and experience. The biggest single predictor of high test scores anywhere in the country, in 12 different state studies that have been done, is the library media program, which includes 3 factors: currency of the titles, number of the titles per student, and how is the library supported and manned. Because you don't put together a good list of current things that tie to curriculum with a person who doesn't have a degree in how to do it. And I don't care if it's digital or paper, it's still the same process. So my recommendation to you is, and this is to anybody in the country, because today we're killing libraries and we're killing education. So that's enough said about that. That one probably won't get me elected here, but. National Council of Teachers of English, Why Literature? Where Teens Find Themselves by Lorna Collier. This is a recent article. Looked at by talented authors like those I mentioned in a list that includes Judy Blume, Robert Cormier, Mildred Taylor, and Ida Sebastian, among others. Teenagers' problems and feelings can illuminate for an adult, the human condition as significantly as can literary treatment of older people's lives. These are works of literature even in the narrowest and most conservative sense. They have a serious intent, careful craftsmanship, effective expression, and other qualities that make literature, literature. So, like my dad knew, get the books in front of them, find out what they like, let them read what they want, in some cases, rather than what you shove down their throat, because it has to be done. I don't have enough time to go into all these, but these are just books that I recommended this summer. And they're Polio Holes, nonfiction, Phineas Cage, nonfiction, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, nonfiction. These are all science-oriented, cross-curricular, interdisciplinary books that are all on exemplar text lists. This is from Phineas Cage. Again, that has boy written all over it. And boys do love that book. It's about brain anatomy, brain physiology. It's a true story, though. That actually happened to a guy. That guy.
What's he doing?
Phineas Cage. Again, pick your theme and go. The Revealers. It's on bullying, both cyberbullying and physical bullying. The Red Umbrella. Non-fiction account of Castro's overtake of Cuba. And an operation called Pedro Pan, where parents got their kids out of Cuba to get them away from what was going on, which started out as socialism, communism, horrific stories. Bill O'Reilly's Lincoln's Last Days, another great book. That book isn't really annotated though, and that's why it's there, because to me, when you read that book and you find out all the crazy things that Booth wanted to do, and you find out who he was doing them with, you go, no way. And then you want to go do the research to find out if it really did happen the way Bill O'Reilly said it did. But you have to go do research to find that out. And that's okay. Kids will do that because that book's an interesting book. Great for Civil War. This is just a quick video. This is Christopher. It made a difference. Has playing Cranium CoRE and discussing a game and the book made a difference.
Yes, it has, because it makes you really think about exactly what happened. Like, the key points in the whole story is actually differentiate which ones from the main idea, but it actually helps you with the supporting details of the whole content of the story. It's just a very good book.
When the lady who did that video with him, he was the only one who volunteered in the class. And she was horrified because she didn't know what he would say, because he was always on the outside. And you can't tell by looking at him with that power fist thing in his head, but he's a teacher's worst nightmare, normally, in intensive reading. But he volunteered, and she videotaped him and then did this. He's a future felon, but that's what he said about that process. And to me, that's like a poster child for discussion and reading in depth and being on the fringe and not knowing that they're really paying attention in their own way, because you can't always tell. In closing, now I want to say one other thing. You'll hear a lot about complex text. You hear about that already? Have you ever heard of complex text? Textual complexity? What I find very interesting about the Common Core is the complexity of what's going on with the Common Core. And I went to college and I graduated with a degree in misunderstanding, and I minored in confusion. So I'm really good at picking out stuff that is like, whoa, that's way too confusing. And I'm not getting down on the Common Core, really. I'm just saying, I like my dad's way a lot better. Find out what they're interested in. Let them read what they want, talk to them about it, and let them interact with one another. You can still do that within the framework of the Common Core, and it fits. This book is my last recommended book for this session. Push has come to shove, and I'll probably, like with Jim Trelease, 17 years later, recommend his book, the Read Aloud Handbook, for a long time to come. Push has come to shove is a great read. It's not going to be a comfortable read for educators, because it's going to hold you accountable. At the very end of this book, he tells a story that I told at the interactive conference when I ended. And it struck me, so I'm going to tell it to you again. And it's one of those worth repeating stories anyway for those of you who heard it already. There was a king of an ancient empire in the northern part of Europe. He had no sons, he had a beautiful daughter. He was reaching the end of his life. And he wanted to marry his daughter off. A lot of knights wanted her hand because they would inherit the kingdom. So he got this idea. I'll have a contest for my daughter's hand. So there was a very raging river that ran through the middle of the kingdom. And it was filled with alligators. And had a very strong current at times, depending on the time of the year. So he picked the right time of year with a strong current. And he put all the knights across the river, and he and his daughter and his wife, the queen, on the other side. And he made an announcement. The first one to get to this side of the river will have my daughter's hand and will inherit the kingdom. All the land, all the riches, all the power. Go. The knights looked at each other, hundreds of them, standing on the edge of the river. They didn't know what to do. They were nervous. Then all of a sudden they hear a splash. And they look over, and there's a guy ripping his way through the water, and the current's taking him. And the alligator's eyes get this big, and they're coming after him. Nobody else jumps in. They're going to watch this guy get eaten. And he goes, and he goes, and he goes, and they start cheering for him. Go, go, go. And he just barely makes it before an alligator tries to get it. Now he's on the edge of the water, and the king is there and holds his hand out and helps him up. And the guy's really exhausted. And he's down on his knees like this, breathing heavy like a basketball player at the end of a game, holding his shorts. Doesn't have anything left. And the king says, "That was magnificent. Do you have anything you want to say?" And he stood up and he said, "I just want to find the guy who pushed me in and thank him." So my word to you, as teachers, is push each other, push your kids, push the envelope all the way around. Because in that way, you're going to create for the kids and yourselves a world that's a better place. Thank you.